So I'm gonna go ahead and give a heads up on something just so that way it really is understood the reason why. It's like what audacity I think I have. It's like, hey, all right, hear me out on this one. Just understand, we're talking about the bureaucratic process, right? We're talking about major holes in legislation. All right, major. All right. Technically, because of the Citizens United rule, the government ended up going ahead and having to go and remove themselves from anything involving any type of public event. All right. So ultimately, anything that would be violating a right to assemble, or for example, like a right to ownership of something that would not require a permit for anyone. All right. Because understand, a part of the Citizens United ruling that ended up when they ended up going ahead and ruling in favor of corporations on that, ended up going ahead and taking away the right to be able to have any say whatsoever in the process of any type of public event that would actually be legal. All right. And not to mention that, technically, a t-shirt cannon would fall under sports memorabilia. It would not technically be considered a weapon. All right. In order for it to be considered a weapon and actually meet the threshold of one, ultimately it would need to be preloaded with something. All right. Because you can't just assume that put anything in, It's not Friday sloppy. It's ultimately you have to go and, put whatever it is that you're going to load it with into the chamber and allow the compression to go. Now keep in mind, considering the factor of how big stadiums are, all right, we're talking full-blown stadiums. All right, t-shirt cannon. Technically, because of the factor that it doesn't end up using any combustible ammunition, all right, because technically carbonation does not fall under the same, same blockades that would end up going ahead and pretty much being covered in the gun show loophole. All right, now keep in mind, there is no requirement for a psychiatric evaluation in order to purchase said t-shirt gun. All right, ultimately, everybody would have to go ahead and have to have a background screening, psychological evaluation, and all that to purchase a t-shirt cannon. All right. Now here's the thing. All right. Technically, the regulation of t-shirt cannons would end up going ahead and running afoul of Citizens United. All right. Now, hypothetically, I'm just saying that type of thing, public knowledge, it's like, hey, listen, if somebody is saying, I'm basically, when it comes to my threshold and patience with this whole situation, if you couldn't tell by how much I've been foaming at the mouth, I am more than fed the fuck up. All right. So me going ahead and clarifying this is me saying, this is me pulling out the literal big guns, And keep in mind, technically, it does not run afoul of any legislation throughout the country. All right. Now, global stage. It would be looked at until it gets attempted as a unsportsmanlike conduct. A yellow flag. Not a red flag. A yellow flag. All right. Especially because of the fact that ultimately, in order to go ahead and prevent that from happening, that would also run afoul on, Citizens United of any combustible drinks. All right. Now, I want you to think what would end up happening if you ended up taking carbonation away from the entirety of the country. All right. They would be really pissed off, especially because of the fact that technically with Citizens United, the government is not supposed to get involved with anything that would look suspicious as, like, corporate espionage, insider trading, anything like that. All right. Any type of algorithmic manipulations and attempt for enrichment and, attempting to keep the proceeds of a crime. It would get ugly for the government to have to explain. you know? So the funny thing is, if you wonder, what is the absolute psycho that snapped going ahead and talking about? Well, he's been rambling on. It's like, hey, so with the amount of war crimes that I've already fucking survived, understand, and we're talking in my fucking 34 years life, alright, almost 35. I am so fed the fuck up with this whole situation that this is the equivalent of this is the big guns. So, don't make me fucking come back there. Alright? So technically, with that, especially because of the specifications, and when it comes down to can't go ahead and copyright a shape or anything like that, basically run afoul of, intellectual property, that whole thing. All right. Technically, that right there, that is not a war crime yet. All right. Keep in mind, the reason why I said yet is because it has yet to be attempted. All right. But understand, if somebody is literally going and doing what they can to strengthen their arm up and everything, and it's like, hey, keep going ahead and making jokes about the GIMP. Keep making jokes about how useless I am, and how ultimately I'm defenseless and scared. I just literally explained to you how legally that right there, with those specific details, would not meet the threshold of prosecution, in any court in the United States. All right? Now, the person that ended up thinking that, which, by the way, yes, it takes a really fucked up person to go ahead and think up a scenario that would literally go ahead and look at laws throughout the entirety of the country and see the laws when it comes down to the entirety of the globe. And, yeah, that one hadn't been done yet. Ironically enough, it's like, hey, if somebody's warning shot is letting you know bureaucratically how you just MacGyvered piece by piece while simultaneously pointing out why it would not meet the threshold of conviction, and technically, by the way, not unconstitutional. All right? So it's like, hey, if you're going to keep making the fuck up jokes, you're going to keep trying to press on and press on and press on and act like an infinite press. Well, yeah. I think going ahead and thinking up and explaining, a technical loophole with the gun show loophole, Citizens United, ultimately the burden of proof, because obviously intent ends up going ahead and mattering, but let's be real. How many people, when it comes down to, end up going ahead and thinking of, makeshift ways to make weapons? I just explained the way for under $2,000 for somebody to be able to go ahead and create keep in mind, the only bad part, obviously, is the one at a time load. So obviously this is a reload point. That's the Achilles heel of it. But with the amount of pressure that those things put out, yeah, technically doesn't even count as a rocket launcher or grenade launcher. Technically falls under sports memorabilia. So when somebody gives you a warning shot of like, hey, I'm being nice and going ahead and pointing out, if I really wanted to be an asshole, well, everybody keep trying to quote unquote call my bluff. As an example, I'm going to go ahead and point out how legally somebody could go ahead and be the owner of a fucking rocket launcher or a fucking grenade launcher that they would single-hand wield, alright? And, if it actually got fired at a person, I'm pretty sure it would end up meeting the same purpose, I mean, I guess technically it would be considered gun light or bazooka mini. I don't know. But, yeah. Ultimately, label that future war crime. You know? Not premeditated, not saying I'm doing it. Not even trying to give any ideas. I'm just going ahead and pointing out because, the whole whistleblower thing, especially because if somebody didn't study for it, how the fuck are they going to know about it? Why would they, end up learning about the fucking law if they hadn't been studying law for a long fucking time? All right? So it's like, hey, if I really wanted to be an asshole, we could go ahead and have that officially made a fucking war crime. All right? Because of the factor of the war crimes that I've literally fucking survived within my 34 years alive. So, anybody would really want to call my bluff about capability or understanding? Because when somebody says, hey, I'm literally, as a warning, telling you how to be able to invent a fucking war crime. A literal war crime that the entirety of the planet had never once thought about. All right? So ultimately, when it comes to the oppression of civil liberties, all right, because wanted to jump to assumption, be like, anything is a weapon. Then, you might want to go ahead and make sure that you don't keep poking and thinking that you got more of a threshold, when meantime, you got somebody that says, hey, I literally have thought of a new way to make the entirety of the world pissed off, while simultaneously, if that situation were to happen, it would be pretty obvious for the person that it would end up hitting, because how many people, it will literally be the first time in forensics history that a literal indenture, all right, like a full-blown, get to find out effectiveness, damage calculation, all right? I'm not saying I have an appetite to do that, though. I'm just saying, pointing out, I'd like to think it's being a good citizen pointing out to the government, hey, you might want to go ahead and look at that one, because, ultimately, I'd like to go ahead and make the point that I can defend myself, and I've been trying to give a warning of like, hey, people have pushed my lines way too long, so, my warning shot was going ahead and telling bureaucratically how legally, when it comes to legal theory, especially because of that whole fucking independent legislature fucking theory, and clearly you've seen with the 1864 Anti-Abortion Act trying to go ahead and get kicked in. Can you understand why I'm saying, like, hey, you really are going to want to reverse course, because I'm going to make it the most embarrassing creation of a fucking war crime that this country has ever seen, if I'm going to have to go ahead and be that fucking guy. But the fact that I was nice enough to give a warning of a way to legally be able to create a war crime that apparently the entirety of the military mentally seemed to have slipped. Whew. So, anyone want to go take any bets if there's any more room to keep poking me and keep fucking with me? Because I think that's the equivalent of a pretty strongly worded letter of somebody that's saying, fuck around and find out happens. That one right there. Tested as a science experiment in a YouTube video or something like that. In a controlled environment. Fucking awesome. Awesome theory to test. That right there would be fun as hell. But if somebody is trying to be intimidating and thinking that they got a chance of being able to do that shit to me, take that piece of information and really think about it. When someone said in a battle of wits you're completely unmatched, that's them not being cocky or confident. It's like, hey, I can be that fucking guy if you want to keep accusing me of being that fucking guy. But you don't want that guy. I don't want that guy. Who wants that guy? That guy's a fucking loser.